Before we start writing any code, we're going to go ahead and set up our database so we can actually store user accounts, because as soon as we start coding, we're going to want to test creating user accounts and sending emails and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a database called auth. You can obviously call this whatever you want, but when we go ahead and set Laravel up, you're going to need to remember your database name, or at least know what your database name is. So once you've created your database, you're going to want to go ahead and create a table, and in this case I'm going to call this users. Now this is really important because within Laravel we need to define a model that basically relates to a database table, and we're going to use Eloquent ORM to access these records. Now that sounds more complicated than it is, but generally we work on a plural basis. So the model that we're going to use will be called user, but our database table is called users. So this is the same for anything else. Now we can define different table names, so if you really do want to call this something different, then please go ahead, but for the purpose of this tutorial I'm going to call this users, just to make things simple for ourselves. Okay, so what we're now going to do is go ahead and define how many columns we want, and in this case we want 9 columns. And we'll go ahead and define each of the pieces of information that we need to store about a user. So nothing too complicated here. We've got an ID, which is going to be the unique identifier for a user. We want this to be an auto increment field, so we want it to increment for every record that's created, and we want this to be the primary key of this table. The next is going to be the email address of the user, because we're going to be storing the email address of the user so we can actually send emails to them. And this is going to be a varchar of 50. You can increase this if you want. We'll be validating against this as well, but you're more than welcome to create this at a higher amount if you feel necessary. We're also going to choose a username and a password. Now the username is going to be a 20 character maximum. Again, we'll be using Laravel to validate this, so we make sure the username doesn't exceed 20 characters. And for the password, when we generate a hash in Laravel, this hash is equal to 60 characters, so we need to store at least 60 characters within each of these fields. If you store any less, your hash will be cut off and your authentication system just won't work. So we also want to store a field or a column called password temp, and this is going to be if a user decides they want to reset their password, if they've forgotten their password. We want to be able to generate and store a temporary password hash that will then replace the password column. So we want to go ahead and cater for that as well with a 60 character limit, because this is also going to be a hash. So we're also going to create a field called code. This isn't going to be a hash, but what it is, it's going to be a random string of characters and numbers. In fact, no, probably not numbers. It'll be a random character string that basically allows us to put this into an email to a user so they can use a specific unique link to activate their account. So we're going to use this as a sort of unique identifier. We're also going to create a column called active. That's going to be an integer. That will be either 1 or 0 depending on whether the user is currently active or not. So they could have created their account. This will by default be 0. Once they've activated, using the code that's sent to them by email within the link, that will then change active to 1, and then they'll be able to sign in. So we'll be using this on the sign in check as well. Now Eloquent ORM uses 2 fields called created_at and updated_at, and these are date time fields, so change these to date time fields. And these are going to store, first of all, when this record was created. So when we use the create method within Eloquent, this will create a created at and an updated at time. With updated at, when we make a change to this record, so for example, let's say the user somewhere along the line changes their username. We're not going to include this functionality, but if they did, and we use the update method, or we save this record, the updated at date and time will be changed to reflect that. So this will always signify when the record was updated. This includes things like changing the user's password. So it just gives us an idea of when this record was last updated. So now that we've got all the fields in here, we don't need to specify any more values in here. Let's go ahead and click go. That's going to go ahead, down here, let's go ahead and click save, and that's going to go ahead and create that users table for us. So we now have the users table ready to go ahead and actually insert data to and read data from.